Good evening, everybody. If you'd like to take a seat, I know there'll be people still coming in, but it's time to get started for our community meeting run by the Lakeview Ratepayers Association. I'd first like to read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands and waters we call Lakeview have been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Ojibwe, Chippewa, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Métis over thousands of years. Today, Lakeview is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and protect these lands and waters with them. By doing so, we show respect for the importance of Indigenous peoples, their history, and our future together. Chi-miigwech. So, as we all know, this opportunity to build this project was initiated by the community. This was a bottom-up planning. This meant that we as a community put forward the concept of looking at residential units on the waterfront and having access to the waterfront as well. The planners told us no. They were the ones that said, nope, can't do this, got to have another power plant. And so we went to City Hall. John Danahy, Jim Tovey went to City Hall, and when they went to City Hall, they showed them how it made more sense to build a new waterfront community and not a new power plant. So we should be proud of ourselves for doing that. Proud that we went against planners and said this is what we want to have. And we were planning at that point for what was coming. We know that there's going to be growth. We were planning for our density, but it was a well-planned growth. It was thought through. We were lucky enough to have John Danahy, Professor Danahy, working with students through the Center of Landscape Research, many things that came together that made that happen. More likely, we're the first community in Canada that we know of that actually asked for planned intensification. Now, how odd is that? You don't hear that very much. So I don't think that anybody could classify us as a NIMBY. And I really detest that word because it doesn't speak to us here in this community for what we've done. So we're not saying, don't build a project here. In fact, we have been saying, build a project here. But memories are short. This was well planned and thought through. It went through many years of a process. In 2010, we had a master plan. We went on to be a major node in 2016. In 2018, the land got bought. And at that point, unfortunately, we lost Jim Tovey, who was our champion. The people that we've had working on this, the Lakeview Ratepayers Association, by the way, started in 1921, have obviously pioneered this along with a group that was part of the ratepayers called the Lakeview Community Advisory Panel that was started in 2018 and at the time was written into the official plan amendment so that we could advise the community, so that we could be working with the city and the planning staff and also the developer. Okay, so this is the site, and one of the things I want to point out is what you see here with all the pretty colors is actually the Lakeview site. The other part in brown is the Rangeview site, and Rangeview is a completely separate development. Originally, the numbers for the two combined were 8,000 units. So now at the moment, Lakeview Village has 8,050 units, plus the MZO, which is another 8,000. The area in brown, that development is coming forward next week into the city, into council, PDC, and they are asking for another 5,300 units. That 5,300 units is bigger than Brightwater. Their numbers are bigger than Brightwater. I just at a meeting last week at Brightwater. They're increasing their numbers by 30%. But they're still only up at around 4,800. So that alone is bigger than the Brightwater density. So I'm just going to talk to what we have, which is an enhanced ministerial zoning order. In general, zoning takes place through the city, and what they do is they give consideration for the existing land uses. And they also include public consultation. So a ministerial zoning order is a provincial, it's an Ontario mechanism that allows the government to go in and rezone a piece of land and override the municipal development constrictions. It gives them the right to take away direct control of the project and rezone the property, and this is supposed to speed up the process. MZOs have been around for a long time, but they were rarely used in this way. They were used for things like building a hospital faster or getting a business developed or a piece of land developed for jobs or something like that. And that's what we had in Lakeview. We had a hospital MZO, we had an MZO for a studio, and then all of a sudden we get this EMZO, which is an enhanced ministerial zoning order, which is the first time that we know of that was put on for a residential use. And at the same time as the Lakeview site, they put it on 2 other sites as well. So what this has meant is that the minister has the authority over all the site control, and in Lakeview's case, it also allows the province to put in their own land facilitator. In other words, it's out of the hands of the city, and you're dealing with a new person that's appointed by the province, and they make a lot of decisions. So we're at an EMZO, and the city has had no say. They were equally as shocked as we were, and it was really a poke in the eye to the community after all the work that they've done and all the work that we've put forward to form our own density. The whole community was involved in this. This wasn't just a few people. This was an entire community that was part of the process. And you know, what happened is that when you were involved in the process, you all had your voices. You all brought them forward and said what you were interested, what you wanted to have, and what you didn't want to have. And one of the things you didn't want to have was another Humber Bay Shores just up the street. I think that was a consensus that went throughout the whole discussion, that was something that was not wanted. So here it gives you an idea of what our MZO is looking like right now. So originally when it was all approved in November of 2021, there was 8,000 units, they added an extra 50, there was 9,000 jobs, 1 school, which they had to fight for, or we had to fight for, district energy, 45 acres of parkland, 2,000 square feet of retail space, and the innovation center, and only about 4.5% affordable housing. Now, we're at 16,000 units. We've still got the same amount of jobs coming, we hope. Now they need at least 2 schools, and no high school is coming. The district energy stays the same. The 45 acres of parkland hasn't changed, so we're still getting that parkland, which we still have no idea how that's all going to happen. And the retail stays the same, but the innovation stays the same. And now what the MZO is saying is that we've crept up to 10,000 on the affordable housing, but actually we've done the numbers, and don't be fooled. It actually works out at 7.5% affordable housing, because the 4.5%, the additional affordable housing is only on the last part of the extra density. So again, it's a little bit of bait and switch going on here, but it's actually 7.5. And now they're talking about the potential for a long-term care facility in the middle of the innovation corridor, which is just a little bit of craziness in there as well. Not saying that we don't need one, we absolutely do. As the ratepayers, we've been asking for it for a long time. This may not be the right place for it. Okay, can you move forward? Okay, so the population-wise, what we were originally looking at was 16,000 to 23,000 population. And now, with our calculations, based on what the city uses as a number, we're looking at a population of approximately 44,000, and reminding you again that this is only on the Lakeview side. This doesn't include Rangeview. The height limits on the waterfront were 6 to 8, and now we're looking at 10 stories on the waterfront, which is again the other place that we wanted to protect out of all of this. There is no building heights on the site, so they can go as high as they want. They've taken away the mixed housing. So as part of a community, the idea is to have a mixture of housing, townhouses and apartments and many other things, but that's gone. So they've taken away the townhouses. They've reduced the landscaped areas, reduced parking standards, and they have a larger footprint, footplate for the towers. So it's not looking very pretty. It was done basically with no good planning sense put into it, whether you know, it was just almost an overnight idea that came through, and we really don't quite know where it came from. There was a good rapport going on between the developer, LCP, and the city. Everything was moving forward. I believe LCP was just about to start putting their pipes in the ground. There were sales already going on, as you know, at Tridel. So it didn't make any sense, and again, we don't know quite where this came from. We do know that LCP went to the city and asked for more density and that it was turned down, but how it came to a doubling of the density is just a little bit of one of those scratch your head type things. So I'm going to ask John Danahy to speak next, and we have been so lucky to have John, because one of the complaints I heard at the Brightwater meeting last week by an architect is, why do you show us flat drawings? We can't imagine what it's going to look like. With John and all his expertise, he has been really spent much of his time and many hours of his time and days, weeks, years doing 3D drawings, which allows us to look at things in a different way. We can see how this is going to look, and I thank John for that.
The initiative for the whole project, I want to emphasize again, so a lot of you may not have been here 20 years ago, 18 years ago when Jim started the first processes, but he came to me as a neighbor and asked if we could use the visualization facilities that we had at the university to help people understand what a project might look like. And I find it really remarkable that we're still at the point today, 20 years later, where we still don't have planning departments doing this as a basic thing. So the image you're looking at right now is essentially the spreadsheet that's being talked about, but no one's been shown. What does another 8,000 units mean? Well, if you take the project, the gray buildings, the others are what was agreed to. And I've taken each of the towers in these areas or replaced townhouses with their block buildings. And it took this many towers, ranging between 32 floors and 40 floors, to reach the 8,000 units on this site. So it's going to look, and it's almost identical in density per hectare, or 44,000 people per square kilometer, other cities. This is, if you know St. Jamestown in downtown Toronto, it's been a problem neighborhood since it was first built. It was overscaled, it didn't have the services, and it's never worked well. And it's almost identical density. This is slightly more than the St. Jamestown in the density equation. It's double the density of downtown Vancouver and over double the density of downtown Toronto. So in this population per square kilometer. Why you would put it on a single road with only one exit west, one exit east, with no major transit backing it up it's unbelievable to me as a professional. I only know of bad cases where they've done this kind of density and then didn't supply subways. Most places with this density are served by more than one subway and streetcars. There's a whole network backing up that level of density. The process that was called Inspiration Lakeview, that was initiated following the Lakeview Legacy effort for 3 years that the ratepayers and the community put together. The community's effort was to initiate that a proper study be done. And it was done exceptionally well, maybe the best I've ever seen as a planning exercise. They brought in the best experts in the country, and they brought in some international experts. And essentially the scheme that everyone ended up agreeing to, ultimately at 8,000 units, it began at 5,300 units, and then there were complaints by OPG and others that we want more to be able to get more money for the land. So that's where it ended up at, and then it moved to, as soon as LCP bought the land, they went back to the city and said, we want more density. We want 8,000, 10,000 units. It ended up at 8,000 units. The council gave them. And that's where you see in the current plan towers. There's a 40-story tower in the plan at the waterfront, a 24-story tower, and those things. Everyone sort of held their nose and said, we can still make this work. The density at 8,000 people is approaching the same density as a typical area downtown Barcelona, downtown Paris. It's actually the same as downtown Toronto at that point, and most of the areas in downtown Vancouver. But at this level, it's doubling all of that. So I felt that it's important to give you an image of what that means as something that is the next step. I think professional planners have a duty to communicate that to the public. And this is really a first sketch, but it's essentially it's a tied-in model. It has a full economic spreadsheet tied to the physical model. You move each floor, and then it adds it up, and then from that you derive the population and the floor area of it. So this is it's really I think it speaks for itself, and the numbers are off the scale for what a project should be in this kind of context. If we were talking about a place that had 2 subway lines, or a subway line and a GO train line and a road network that fed for 3 kilometers in every direction, maybe 10 kilometers, then these kinds of densities can manage themselves. But I don't see how this is going to work. And my specialization is more in urban design and landscape architecture, and I don't see how the ground level experience of these places is reasonable. It's too big a compromise, and I don't think in the name of affordable housing, which is the main rationale for this, that you get enough to offset the impacts. And you shouldn't be concentrating your affordable housing, if they mean subsidized housing, which I don't think they mean, but the amount you get in the end of the day is very trivial. There's this much floor area will generate $3 to $6 billion of profit, because they don't have to pay for any more roads, they don't have to pay for the land, they don't have to pay for the cleanup. They've already paid for all of the other services in it. And even after they pay the development charges and they spend $400 or $500 a square foot to build a unit, they're still going to make $200 to $300 on every unit. So take that times 8,000. And they get that as their return on what investment? And then how much does the public get in return for that? We get about $300 million worth of affordable housing in exchange for them to have the privilege to make $3 billion in profit. I don't think it's a very good exchange in terms of the public interest, because these folks only paid $275 million for the land. So it's working from where it was originally around, I think, $50,000 a unit, and it's coming down into $17,000. The point in raising it is that I think every person in the community should be voicing concern over, what's the deal here? Who's making the money out of this? Because this doesn't make planning sense. This isn't what was on the books, and I think it's a really bad precedent for the whole development industry, because this is a case where a community went out of its way to ask for density that would be appropriate for what the future needs. But if this is the lesson from it, it means no community should ever welcome density, because it doesn't end. It's never enough. And I think that's one of the other questions that comes out of this. What's enough? When is it enough? And when have you done your share? And Lakeview has done its share for 120 years at its own expense, ranging from being the military grounds to 50 years of coal production pollution. Here is where the drinking water plants are in the way of the waterfront. Take that. It services the whole region for water and sewage. And now it's also taking the burden on this. I think it's just way out of line with what could be classified as a fair share and doing your share. The numbers put it in scale, but the real problem right now is politics. This is a political issue. It's out of the hands of being a real planning issue, I would say. an image like in this day and age, with everything we've learned about the qualities of mid-rise housing as being the best possible form for quality of life, whether it's affordable housing or not, is we don't have to go to this extreme in built form to satisfy these needs. And you don't do it all in one place if you have to do it. These are hard to read here, and I think in follow-up we can add some more, and based on what people say tonight, I can make a few more images that might help people understand it more specifically. But this is the image from the original report. The dark orange are the taller buildings, between 24 and 40 stories in the plan, and the idea was that it was mid-rise, at least in this area and a bit around the back, and then this became a high-rise enclave. That was what was negotiated later on after LCP bought it. They were essentially allowed to do this for free because they didn't have to pay any more for the land. They bought the land on the basis of the yellow, not the orange. That's where the price of the land was set in the negotiation, and it came with a master plan that could go straight into planning. But they wanted more, and you know what? They were given the extra height with only 3 months between the time they bought it and the time that the official plan was. They were not slowed down. I've heard, talk about this project as being way too long from some of the Ford government people like Rudy and others that have said, this is taken far too long. It shouldn't take 15 years. Well, it didn't take 15 years for the private sector. It took 12 years to work it through the public, for the public land to be planned and then released. And so the private sector interest has never been slowed down by any aspect of either. The community has always gone along and cooperated with it up to this point and said, well, we don't like it, but let's move on anyway. And so that's the difference there. I didn't have time to try to merge the two models together, but this model is what's in this model, and the gray buildings are pretty much the same, but the blue buildings I had to make that many tower buildings to accommodate it. I can probably reduce 4 or 5, 6 of those towers by making some bigger floor plate towers like they described. But it's still, the skyline is still gone, these looming structures. And the fact that people are living so far off the ground, it's no longer a grade connected community. It's something more like being down around the Sky Dome. And, or Humber Bay in terms of isolation.
In 2018, in June of 2018, an official plan amendment was made for 6,800 units. That was within 3 months of owning the site. So that continued on. And by November of 2021, there was a full approval for 8,050 units. Nothing was slowed up by the community. In fact, we worked very closely with LCP and the city and the planning staff. We're very lucky because in this community we have some really well-versed people in planning, landscape design, and we've been lucky to have them here, sustainability, and they all helped. Retired engineers, they've all put their fingers into this and all sat around and figured out the numbers. And this is one of the opportunities that we've had with this. It's taken us a while to look at it, and as the news has continued on over the last 2 months, and I'll get into that in a minute, over what's happened with the housing ministers and various other MZOs and greenbelts, is that it's given us the opportunity to really dig down deep and look into the numbers. So John's had opportunity to pull the images together. Another gentleman, John Outram, has had chance to get into the numbers and look at the profitability, which is absolutely mesmerizing. And we're trying to be fair and just give a good range, but it could be worse than what we think. And as John said, the thing is that they don't have to buy any extra land for those 8,000 units. The land is already purchased, and it was purchased in 2018 at $275 million. It seems like a real deal right now. And there's nothing extra. There's bigger pipes in the ground, yes. But the amenities and the things that are needed in a true community like this, there's going to be needed an extra school. Where's that going to go? There's many other things that need to be part of this extra green space. So, you know, I think we've played fair. And, you know, they talk about getting things right. But we were not interested in having an Amazon warehouse for people at the waterfront. That was never the deal. The deal was a well-planned community and planning for the future in Lakeview. Yeah, so what I just also wanted to mention is that the original numbers that John spoke to when this came out of the master planning process in 2014 was approximately 5,400 units. So in actual fact, this hasn't doubled the density. This has tripled the density from what was originally, by professionals and experts, thought to be the best number density on this site. These numbers are pretty real, and it goes to show, first of all, the increase, but also the interesting thing is the cost per land per unit, which is now down at $17,000. So each unit land cost is $17,000. Now, do you think that that's going to get passed on to the people that buy these units? Not at all. Because those units, as we all know, if anybody has looked at the prices, is around $750,000 for one of the lowest ones, up to, I've heard, $5 million, some of them. And that's, it actually works out to about $1,350 per square foot, yes. And we do know, because we've analyzed the other areas, that in addition, if you look on the north side, for example, is it Brixton, and a few of those other sites, that theirs are selling for about $1,200, $1,250. So you know that going south of the lake shore, you're looking at an extra $100 a square foot. But here you've got land that actually has been purchased for a very good price, but none of that is going to be paid forward. None of that is going to be part of, you know, anything that's going to help to make any more affordability. And we even wonder if that affordability is going to come from the developer, or is that affordability going to come from some funding from a province or something like that. We know that the district energy, they were seeking funding for that as well. They gave up on the vacuum waste. They decided that that wasn't going to work out for them just because of the cost. And so, you know, what are we getting in return? We need return for the community. We have an existing community, the community of 20,000 or so that lives here already, that is going to have to put up with many years of extra traffic, and we won't even get into that conversation because that's a very long one, but extra traffic, the construction, and many other things that are going to go as part of this project. And it is a long project. I know that a couple of years ago, before the interest rates went up, material and labor costs went up, there was some thought that this could be done in a much shorter time frame, but obviously now it's going to be a longer time frame. And how is that going to work? Is Tridel going to happen? Because if I paid $750 or $1 million for one of their units, I'd be pretty worried about what I'd bought into. And they're looking at a time frame of 2028 for moving in, if that. So what's the rest of it going to look like? Is it going to be that they start parceling off the land, and that means it goes to, just like happened at Brixton? So once the approval was through, they sold the land, a 1 acre piece of land, for $25 million. So land has become a commodity, and that's not just in Lakeview, that is everywhere in the world. But there has to be, you know, an end to, so that people, our children, seniors, can move on and be able to have some affordability to buying in the neighborhood that we've all lived in. Yeah, so the number that we've come up with, and it's a very conservative number on the profitability, is $2 to $4 billion. And so we'll just sort of talk briefly about what it is that's going to affect us. We know that on this site and with the Rangeview site, they're going to need at least another 2 schools. So there was already a concern about the first school, and that's actually one of the things that held up things for a long time. The same with Brightwater, is it's hard to get, first of all, the school board to look into this or even think about it, but it has to be thought about because you need the land to put the school. The second thing is the school board had no urban plan for a school. They only had the old plans where they needed 7 acres. So that becomes an issue. And so they settled on, I think, 4 acres for the school in Lakeview. But where is the other 2 times 4 acres going to come from for the next schools that's going to be needed? The green space is limited. It sounds like we're getting a lot, we're getting the waterfront, but it's a very narrow strip of land, and it's going to be fantastic to have. We know that the city was putting forward $107 million for that, for making that work. The thing is that I know that speaking to LCP 2 years ago, they said that at least $200 million was needed. So the piers, we see the pretty pictures of the piers, and those were part of the plan, buying the land, that was part of the plan. You know, where's all that coming from? It should be coming out of the profit, you would think, but hey, I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. And then we've got to look at all the other development that we have coming along Lakeshore Road. So we have Rangeview, we've already spoken to. There's been talk of Dixie Value Mall, and I know that's come down, but I mean, ultimately, that's what they're going to be looking at. And then we can look at all the other small projects all along the Lakeshore Road. It gives you an idea of how many units for each of these. Now, Van Dyke has just gone under, but it's still a piece of land that's outstanding. And it gives you the number of units and of what's been approved, mostly, I think, in the yellow part, which is about 22,485. And then the other ones that are being discussed. So we're looking at a lot of units, almost 30,000 units, just in Lakeview. Not talking about Port Credit, because there's other ones in the Port Credit area as well. This is just in Lakeview. And what that means to our population, and as we know, the problems we have with the roads already, there's no plan for that either. We need to ensure that the politicians are aware of how we think. A lot of people have given up. They've just said, you know what, nobody listens to me, nobody hears my voice. But you have to stand up and you have to do something. You have to, you know, this is worth it. It's worth putting your voice forward. What we're asking for is quite simply that they overturn the EMZO at Lakeview. It's very simple. And the reason we're asking for it, and the reason there is a glimmer of hope, is because of what's happened in the news cycle in the last 2 months, if anybody's been following. So it started with, there were some privileged developers who managed to buy land at a very low rate and got permission to build in the Greenbelt. Then what happened is that sort of got found out, and that sort of got overturned, and Doug Ford walked it back, and you know, we've had the resignation of a minister after everybody messed around and thought that it was a problem with some young boy that had decided to make this decision. And so we've got a new minister, Paul Calandra, in place. And now there is an RCMP investigation into this as well, because it seems that there's more to the story that we're now uncovering. So the news cycle has continued. It hasn't stopped. We thought it would stop, you know, MZO came along, and then right afterwards, 5 days later, all of a sudden, we're going to be out of the region of Peel. It seemed like a little bit strange that that would be happening all at once, but it did. But then you get into this news cycle, and this news cycle has continued. It's gone on and on and on with some fresh new revelations. Those privileged developers, I hate to tell you, are the same developers that are building Lakeview Village. So that's why we have a glimmer of hope, because already there is investigations going on. This is happening. This is not to do with Lakeview. This is to do with the Greenbelt. This is to do with other regional boundaries that have been turned back. This is to do with other MZOs, and they are reviewing every single MZO that happened under the previous minister. That's why it's time for us to now put our voices forward, because it's gone through that whole news cycle. And now we're down to Lakeview. How is this affecting us? We had this happen extremely quickly. There was no due process that took place. It just happened overnight almost. City said they don't know anything about it. The planning staff, I can tell you, were devastated. The day we went to PDC, they were absolutely gutted. The people that had worked on this for 5 or so years were absolutely gutted. And we worked with a lot of those people, and they had no clue. It was a gut wrench for them, because I know some of them actually cried. So this is why it's time. This is where the glimmer is, because they are reviewing every single MZO, and there's a very short period of time, because by December the 7th, they need all the municipalities to gather in all their information and send it off to the minister, and he's doing his review. So now's the time for us to put our voices forward. It's the time to let your neighbors know, your friends, whoever you, write to that minister, and we're going to try and give you the tools to do that. Write to the minister, get your voice in there, and at least make some noise, if nothing else. It's the only time we're going to have, and we're lucky too that the news has gone on and on and on for 2 months, that it's got to this point. And what it's done is it's got to the point where we realize that actually part of that Greenbelt scandal and everything else that's happened is also tied into Lakeview, because it is the same developers. It's the same privileged people. So what we did on November the 2nd as an organization, we wrote 2 letters. One came from the Lakeview Community Advisory Panel that worked on this for 5 years. And one came from the Lakeview Ratepayers, and you've got copies of that letter, which said, we strongly oppose the proposal. We said that we wanted to be very careful how we chose our words. We did not want to be outrageous or put in, pages and pages of why not. We were very precise, and that's why that letter was written that way. It took a lot of thought. It took us 2 weeks to write that letter. And we ended with, we urge you to uphold the negotiated master plan and stick to the original plan of 8,050 units as proposed. So what we've done is, I don't know if it's working yet, but we have an online petition that people that can go to on their phone, not yet, okay, that will be able to go on their phone and be able to link in directly. But tonight what we've done is we've created some petition sheets. We've given you a copy of the letter. We've given you a list of people you need to write to the minister, and I would copy in Councillor Dasco, Rudy Cassetto, Charles Souza. Make sure they're all copied in so that they all know how you feel. You can use our original letter, and all you have to do is say, we agree with what they said here. Or you can pick something else that you want to say, whatever else you want to talk about, whether it's the schools or whatever. But it's a time to have that voice. If you have any questions, we're here for a while. And there is a petition right at the back that the 2 ladies are waving around at me. So you're welcome to do that, or if you want to talk to any one of us, please do. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming out. I really appreciate it.